Harriet. I know it's not customary to show up early for a reunion, but I don't care. I want to see Brad when he first arrives, if he even comes at all. Neither he nor I have ever been to a reunion before. The last time we saw each other was 25 years ago, right at graduation. I doubt he'll want to see me, but I live in hope that he's willing to forgive me. I sit at the table where I see my former classmates come in and register for the banquet and dance. Thank goodness there are name tags. So far, I haven't recognized anyone by sight, nor have I exchanged the lie that you haven't changed a bit. Mostly we're fatter, grayer, and slower than we were. 25 years ago, Brad and I were getting engaged, planning to get married while he was in college or after he graduated. I expected the ring shortly after our high school graduation. We had been an established couple for over a year and had known each other for many more years. No one envisioned what would happen, at least not me. During spring break, Brad went on a mission trip to Ethiopia with his church's youth group. I missed him very much. Frederick Donaldson was the big man on campus that all the girls ran after. He didn't pay attention to me for most of our high school life, but it didn't bother me because I had Brad. He asked me out on a date. I said, "Brad and I are fine. You know that. You and I are over 18 years old. That means we are of age and can decide what we want to do. Well, I want to remain faithful to Brad." "Are you engaged yet?" "Well, no." "Then there's no harm in going on a date with a friend." Why the sudden interest in me? For two reasons. One, I've always berated myself for not asking you out before you and Brad started dating. Two, shortly after graduation, I'm going to be leaving to stay with my parents in New York City. I'll be living alone until graduation. If we don't go on a date now, I may never have that opportunity again. I had heard about the exquisite restaurants where Frederick had his dates, the kind that neither my family nor Brad could afford. What girl wouldn't want to ride in a brand-new Corvette convertible? Frederick was the best-looking and richest boy in his graduating class. My defense was weakening. "I think I should check with Brad first. I thought he was in Ethiopia. I don't think you'll have time to talk to him." "Can we make sure Brad doesn't find out?" "Sure, I can take you to Overton where none of the locals ever go." We made a date for Friday. He took me to a French restaurant where they don't ask how much the food costs. Frederick ordered for me. I was surprised that the waiter brought a bottle of champagne when we were both only 18 years old. Money has its privileges. I'd never tasted champagne before, but I didn't want Frederick to think I hadn't. I drank it as if it were soda. I felt good immediately. Frederick was charming and regaled me with stories about the places he'd been and the important people he'd met. He promised to introduce me to my favorite band that he knew personally. As we got up to dance, I hoped the night would never end. He hugged me so tightly I felt like I had become a part of his body. His hand on the top of my ass pulled me to him. It appeared that this was how most couples danced. Again, I didn't want him to think I wasn't used to dancing like this. I started to get aroused. I imagined I was with Brad, and I pressed myself harder against Frederick, who had replaced Brad for me. He kissed me, and I kissed back. Like he said, I wasn't engaged yet and wanted to show my appreciation for dinner and dancing. I was beginning to get drunk. Frederick said he was worried what my parents would think if I brought her home in such a state. He suggested we have coffee. I accepted. Before I knew it, we were in the hotel room and Frederick was already making coffee. We sat together on the bed while the coffee brewed. He flattered me and started kissing me again. Although I kissed him back, I weakly said, "We shouldn't." His lips continued to wander, and my body expressed pleasure while my mouth kept saying, "We don't have to." He said he admired my restraint. "You're such a strong woman, I bet you could have stayed away from temptation." I liked the compliment and agreed. He said, "Let's prove it." Before I knew it, he had his pants down and was popping out in all his glory. I have to admit he was impressive. I was in shock. "See, you weren't scared. I bet you could even touch it and not get turned on." I was already horny, but I couldn't admit it. He quickly laid me on my back and pulled down my panties. I was about to yell, "Stop!" when the most wonderful feeling overtook me. My mouth was saying no, but my body was moving in rhythm. With a little squirming and moaning, I experienced a finish, the strongest I had ever felt. I pulled myself together and sat up. I told him that was all I could do. It felt so good I knew it was a lie. I waited to be convinced otherwise. He repeated again that we would be breaking up soon, Then he added that this might be my last chance to experience another man before I officially committed to Brad. I guess this reasoning and the remaining champagne influence made us go from kissing to sex again. My seduction was gradual and seemed inevitable. About half an hour into the second round of sex, it came to me what I had done. I started crying. I was saving my virginity for my husband. What am I supposed to do now? Frederick declared, "You are the best woman I have ever made love to. Harriet, I have always been in love with you. Now I believe it is love. I want you to come to New York with me." I can't just leave like that. What about Brad? What about college? Harriet, what do you think Brad will do when he finds out what we did tonight? Do you really want to worry about college and finding a job? Didn't you say you wanted to be a wife and mother first and foremost? You can do that and not worry about money if you marry me. Frederick, this is too much for me to handle the way I feel. Please take me home. I stayed away from Frederick until Brad returned. The guilt felt like a 50-pound bag weighing me down. I was so ashamed. I was sure that by looking at me, everyone realized what I had done. I knew my parents would disown me if they found out. To leave, Frederick or not, sounded better and scarier with each passing moment. I was nervous when Brad and I first met after his trip. I thought for sure he was going to see the scarlet letter A on my forehead. But Brad was so engrossed in telling me about his missionary trip that I don't think he would have noticed anything different about me if Frederick and I hadn't made love in front of him. I just let him talk and talk and talk about what a life-changing experience it was. He seemed so disinterested in what I was doing while he was away that I was able to reduce my guilt over the following weeks. I was back to my usual Brad girl lifestyle, and he didn't notice that anything was wrong. I thought everything was fine too until I missed my period. I wasn't on the pill because I wasn't married yet. That night I was too engrossed to check if Frederick was wearing a condom or not. The chances of me getting pregnant were slim, considering we had only done it twice. By the time I graduated high school, I was 2 months pregnant. I was already starting to get a bump. I broke the news to Frederick. I was surprised. He thought the news of my pregnancy was great. Now his parents were more likely to approve of the marriage. He convinced me that he really loved me and would take care of me. Not knowing what else to do, I decided to leave town before my pregnancy out of wedlock became an embarrassment, and it seemed like the best alternative. I remembered how good the sex with Frederick had been, and somehow the wishful thinking had helped me believe that Frederick and I could have a happy marriage and family. But what to do about Brad? What I did next was as shameful as the fact that I had gotten pregnant. I guess it was a defense mechanism that allowed me to come up with things to be mad at Brad for. I'd say things like, "If you like being around half-naked black women so much, why don't you go back and stay there? You have such a big head that we both can't fit through the door together anymore. I'm tired of you neglecting me. And of course, I saw the way you were looking at that girl. If you need her more than me, take action." Such statements were accompanied by me picking on him for any tardiness, lack of compliments, or annoying behaviors like poking his knuckles. By the time I graduated high school, I told him to forget about the engagement. I started openly dating Frederick. I wasn't sure how Brad would react. He became distant and started drinking. He showed up to our graduation ceremony drunk. The last time I saw him, he was puking his guts out at the Dairy Deep. It helped perpetuate the false belief that I would be better off without him. I was so engrossed in my trip down memory lane that I wasn't paying attention to the incoming. I had already started frantically scanning the crowd when I heard behind me, "Hi, Harry!" I immediately jumped up from my seat. Brad was the only one calling me Harry. I wanted to hug him so badly. "Have a seat, Brad, if you're not busy." Meeting up with old fiancés and friends is the whole reunion thing, isn't it? Brad, we were never engaged. I regretted saying that as soon as I uttered it. "Please sit down." He sat down across from me. His face didn't look friendly. "Is Frederick here?" "Frederick passed away over a year ago. He suffered from multiple sclerosis for the last part of his life." "I sympathize with you." "Any children?" "2. Both girls. One is married, the other is in a same-sex relationship. I'm really an empty nester now. What about you?" "Never been married, no serious girlfriend. I've had trust issues with women." I thought, oh shit, He's still holding a grudge against me. Nothing good is going to come of this. I guess I should take my shot and leave if things get too bad. Brad, I came today hoping you'd be here. I'd like to apologize to you for the way I ended our relationship. I'm sorry you left me. I sighed. Yes, and quite rudely and insensitively at that. I'd like to explain why I did that, if you'll allow me. And why should I do that? To give us both a chance to finish our conversation. Don't tell me you haven't wondered why I did what I did. Don't tell me you never thought about me again. I think I've thought about you almost every day since then. I'm sorry, but I find it hard to believe that you thought of me so much, even though you thought of me so little back then. That's why I want to talk to you. I loved you then, and I still do. That's frightening. If you loved me and treated me like that, I'm afraid of what you might do to me if you hated me. Can you get us a couple drinks? I need something for my nerves. A Bloody Mary for me. He stood for a minute with a puzzled look. The drinks aren't free. I think they cost $7.50 apiece. I gave him a 10. He taught me another lesson in how much resentment he still had left in him. I drank my BM pretty quickly. Brad was sipping his bourbon and Sprite. I told him my story about Frederick and me when Brad was on the missionary trip. I explained how ashamed I was. My plan to say nothing and continue our marriage fell apart when I found out I was pregnant. Escaping with Frederick seemed like the easy way out. Now that Frederick was gone and there were no children left, I wondered if there was anything I could do to make up for the way I'd treated him. Brad was silent for quite some time. He seemed to have come to some sort of conclusion. That's quite a story. I had no idea you were pregnant. You know, the fact that you had sex with Frederick and got pregnant isn't the worst thing you did. You chose not to tell me. You didn't believe that my love for you would allow me to find a way for us to stay together. I don't think we have a future now because I know you don't trust me enough. Oh, Brad, if you gave me a chance, I promise I would do everything I could to show you that you can trust me. Just give me a chance. We started to notice that our conversation was being overheard. Brad, could you come up to my room and continue our conversation in private? He agreed and walked over to the table to order alcohol and have it sent to my room. Once in my room, he sat down in a chair and pulled it close to the bed I was sitting on. We talked about some relatively trivial things until the liquor arrived. Once the drinks were poured, the conversation became serious again. I spoke again. I've been convincing myself that you'll be fine when I'm gone. My thoughts were mostly occupied with the pregnancy and getting used to my husband. The sexual component of marriage was the easiest to get used to. Frederick seemed to be looking forward to our child until he found out it was going to be a girl. Nevertheless, he seemed pleased, but not excited. I should have known when he asked me in the delivery room when we could start trying for a boy. As soon as I could, Frederick and I started having sex with the goal of getting pregnant again. More specifically, having a boy was his main goal. He was disappointed again. He started drinking a lot and became rude to me, especially during sex. During one episode of rough sex, my water broke. I went into labor a few weeks premature, and complications arose. Frederick was devastated when he found out I couldn't have any more children. Frederick stayed away from home as much as possible. When he was home, he was angry and rarely engaged with the girls. After about a month, his mood changed. He seemed happier. Our sex life had diminished, but he was no longer rough. I breathed a sigh of relief when he actually became nice to the girls. Frederick worked in his father's business. His father hoped that Frederick would someday replace him. As the years passed, his father became less optimistic about Frederick's ability to run a large business. This became evident in the will that was drawn up after the untimely death of both parents in an automobile accident. Frederick was truly saddened by their passing, but became furious when the will was read. Although he was appointed CEO, his powers were severely limited. The real power and management went to the board of directors. Over time, however, Frederick began to enjoy being a mere figurehead. He attended business dinners where important people mingled with a few celebrities. He prided himself on his charitable work, that is, giving away money, and he always took credit for the fact that the company's affairs took a turn for the worse after his father was gone. The girls and I didn't enjoy his success, except that we had more expenses. With his parents gone, he no longer had to hide his big secret. Not only did he have a mistress, but she gave him the son he so desperately needed. They went from being a secret to being a source of pride for him. The guest house on our property became the home of his second family. He spent more time with her and his son than he did with us. At the time, I had no choice. I couldn't imagine divorcing him and living on much less than what we were used to, at least until the girls finished school. Janet, his mistress, turned out to be a very nice woman. She genuinely loved Frederick and regretted falling in love with a married man. We became friends, and soon the girls and her son were playing together. While I was waiting for the right time to break up the marriage, Frederick received news of his multiple sclerosis. From the beginning, he was not a compliant patient. He was determined to ignore the doctor's advice and walk away with a twinkle in his eye. This meant he went back to smoking cigars, drinking, and whoring. The latter activity was what caused him to lose his mistress. She left with a monthly fee that guaranteed access to his son, though the latter showed no interest in following in his father's footsteps in business or whores. I stayed with Frederick until the very end. When he died, he left all of us, including his second family, in complete material wealth. I am truly free. I can go where I want and do what I want. I hope you want me in your life, whatever it takes. There, I've poured out my soul. What do you say? Bread. I guess I should tell you my story first. After you left me, I started drinking. At one time, I was close to alcohol poisoning. It was after you left with Frederick. I'm glad I didn't know you were pregnant. That might have pushed me even closer to suicide than I was. I saw Harriet's reaction to that statement. She started crying. I got to a good therapist and started my life over. I went to college and dove headfirst into my studies. I finished college in 3 years and was hired at a good company with career opportunities. I hardly dated at all. But even then, I never had more than a first date. Harriet, I have to be honest. You really ripped my heart out and tore it into little pieces. I loved you so much. I never would have believed you could betray me. I let that statement sink in. I've realized over the last 20 years that I never stopped loving you, no matter how hard I tried. Believe me, I've tried hard. Again, I paused for empty effect. Now Harriet was pleasantly surprised. I came here ready to shame you, ridicule you, and make you feel as bad as possible. Now I have my chance, but I just can't do it. Hell, I still love you despite... I can't help it. The thing I want most right now is to rip your clothes off and make love to you. You don't need to rip my clothes off, Brad. I can take them off just as fast. And she did. Over the next 4 hours, I was able to climax 3 times, and she was able to climax much more. We lay in bed, wet with sweat. We were exhausted, blissfully exhausted. I felt it was time for the ultimate question. I asked her, "Where do we go next?" She replied, "Anywhere." Do you really mean that? Absolutely. If you ask me to sell my house and move where you are, I'll be there. I'll move in with you or buy an apartment near you, whatever you want. I have so much catching up to do. We have about 30 years or more ahead of us to make each other happy. I don't want to waste a minute of it. Okay, here's the plan. I'm coming up with it as I think about it. I need to do a few things to prepare for you moving in with me. You're selling your house. When you're all packed up and ready to move, call me and tell me you're on your way. Until then, don't call me. Let's let our anticipation build so we'll experience an explosion of joy and, of course, sex when you arrive. It'll be just like tonight, only better. She looked a little puzzled, but readily agreed. We made love for as long as we could before I had to check out of the room. Harriet, oh my God, my wildest dreams had come true. I immediately called the girls and told them about my good fortune. I can't wait for the girls to meet Brad. Over the years, I have told them about Brad. They agreed with me long ago that they wished I had married him, even though they realized they wouldn't have been born then. After talking to the girls, I changed my Facebook page to In a Relationship. If there was any better way to let the world know, I would have. In the weeks that followed, I was busy getting rid of clothes and furniture, closing utility bills, saying goodbye, and selling the house. My realtor said I had priced it too low, but I wanted the house to sell quickly, and so it did. Everything was going well, except that I was dying to call Brad before I was ready. I picked up the phone a few times, but the last thing I wanted to do was upset Brad. I had trouble falling asleep even as I tried to remember our night together. Finally, before I completely lost my mind, it was time. My heart was beating so hard it was ready to jump out of my chest. I was about to call my one and only true lover to tell him that I was on my way to the beginning of the happiest time of my life. "Hello," a female voice answered. I guessed it was the maid Brad had probably hired to clean up before I arrived. "Yes, can I talk to Brad? He's very busy right now. We're getting our daughter ready for college. Can I tell him who's calling?" Daughter? I didn't know Brad had a daughter." "Then you must not know him very well. Usually everyone he talks to hears him brag about his daughter and son ad nauseum. Sometimes I get lucky and get mentioned." She chuckled. "And you?" "His wife, of course. Hey, you're not the crazy bitch who tried to seduce my husband at the reunion, are you? Are you Harriet?" I fell to my knees and sobbed. My world had just been shattered. "Hello, Harriet?" It was Brad's voice. "Now you know how it feels. Don't you dare call again." Brad. I looked at my wife. It was obvious she was worried about the call. She said, "I guess you were right after all. I can't believe she could have called here." I told you she was confident. Apparently, she was able to convince the doctors that it was okay for her to leave the sanitarium. She wanted to believe so badly that I was single and wanted her that she heard me say it in her mind. I bet she is so crazy she would have passed a lie detector test. When I realized how unhinged she was, I stopped being angry at her for the way she treated me years ago. I'm afraid she mistook my kindness for something more. I'm so glad I didn't give her our address. Too bad she had our phone number. She must have gotten it from the reunion committee. If she calls again, we'll have to change the phone number. We may have to get a protective order from her. I feel sorry for her in a way. Poor Harriet. She really will be poor Harriet if she dares to show up at my house. I watched my wife retire to our daughter's bedroom. I gave a satisfied sigh. I praised myself for managing to change my revenge plan in a matter of seconds. I only wish I had a videotape of her reaction to the phone call. I don't care if revenge is served hot or cold. It still tastes good. "Ted looks so handsome in his uniform," said Donna Linder to her longtime friend Carol Bruce. "Yes, he does," Carol replied, looking at her husband with tenderness and pride. Carol stood a few feet away from her husband and looked around the large room. People were gathered in groups and chatting animatedly. Some were socializing with old friends. Others were meeting for the first time. Carol expected a lot of people to gather today, and the room was filling up quickly. Carol had seen pictures of her husband in his military uniform, but they were taken when he was younger, before they met and married. Today was the first time she had seen Ted in uniform, and she couldn't get over how handsome and energetic he looked. "What kind of uniform is he wearing?" Donna asked. "It's unfamiliar to me. And those medals—" "It's a Ukrainian army dress uniform," Carol said of the green dress uniform with a white shirt and black tie. "He's wearing two bigger medals, the ones with the blue and yellow ribbons. That's the title of Hero of Ukraine and the Order of the Gold Star. These are Ukraine's highest honors for bravery. President Zelensky personally signed the award certificate." Carol waved her hand toward an easel that showed two framed certificates of award medals that adorned her husband's chest. Carol looked at it again with pride. "He's also wearing American honors. He was awarded the Silver Star and 2 Purple Hearts in Afghanistan, but that was before we met." "I had no idea he volunteered to fight in Ukraine," Donna said. "What the hell would make a man his age volunteer to go fight in another country, especially in a country thousands of miles from his home? He's not even Ukrainian. He's from Beaumont, for crying out loud. Couldn't you talk him out of it?" "I tried," Carol said. "I tried to talk him out of going. I begged and pleaded and argued with him, but he'd already made up his mind. There was nothing I could say or do to change it." Carol remembered the day she had come home from work and found her husband at home, a saucer and a cup of coffee in front of him, the dark walnut dining table glistening in the light of the pendant lamp. He sat in silence. "Hello, darling. What are you doing home? I thought you'd be back in town late tonight. Is everything okay?" Ted had to drive an hour to take a reading in downtown Dallas, and he told his wife he'd be home late. It was 8 o'clock in the evening. almost 3 hours later than the time Carol usually came home. If she had known Ted would be home, she would have canceled her plans and come home right after work. "There's something we need to talk about. Pour yourself a glass of wine or coffee and have a seat." Carol was slightly alarmed by her husband's abrupt tone. "I'll take a quick shower and change into something more comfortable," she said. "No!" Ted shouted at her, shocking Carol even more. "Sit down! This is important, and I'm not going to wait for you to get cleaned up." Carol felt herself turning pale. She nervously pulled her usual chair over to the table across from her husband and sat down, placing her cell phone on the table in front of her. Carol lowered her gaze to her folded hands in front of her and felt the heat from her body leave blurry patches of condensation on the dark, glossy wood. Out of the blue, Carol remembered the day she and Ted had bought the dining room set. The furniture was Amish-made, well-constructed, and very expensive. Being able to afford expensive furniture was a new experience for them after years of setting up their home in department stores or IKEA. "In about 4 hours," Ted began, glancing at his watch, "I'll be on a flight to Warsaw, Poland. From there, I'll take a train or bus to Kiev, Ukraine. I signed a 12-month contract to fight in the Ukrainian army. I have withdrawn 25% from my savings account, but I won't touch my current account. I gave Sam Albright my power of attorney. Here's his card," Ted said, holding it out to Carol. Carol felt dizzy, as if she were about to faint. I don't understand," she finally managed to squeeze out. "Is this a joke? You're 45 years old. You can't go off to fight in some war." "I can, and I'm ready. I may have gotten my combat experience 22 years ago, but some things are not forgotten." "What about the kids? Have you told them? Are you going to leave the kids?" "Trey is married with a son of his own, and Lisa is engaged to a good man. My kids are going to be fine." Carol stared at her husband in shock. He referred to Trey and Lisa as his children, taking Carol outside the family bracket. She had come into their lives 15 years ago when Trey was 6 and Lisa was 4. Ted had divorced his first wife when he caught her having an affair with his boss. She hadn't contested the divorce. She was happy Ted found out about their affair because it gave her a chance to start her life over without the burden of a husband or children. She didn't ask for custody or visitation and agreed to give up her parental rights in exchange for not having to pay child support. The children had been in therapy for 2 years because their mother had abandoned them when Carol came along. She couldn't have loved Trey and Lisa more, even if she had given birth to them herself. Ted's harsh reminder that Trey and Liza were his children, not hers, was a kick in the butt for Carol. "How can you say such horrible things?" Carol cried. She felt tears come to her eyes. She was their mother, for crying out loud. "I met with them last week to let them know what's going on. They're not thrilled about it, but they understand. They'll be fine." "Last week?" Carol asked, surprised. "They didn't say anything to me? I thought we were much closer, especially Lisa." When Ted and Carol got married, Lisa snuggled up to Carol. She desperately needed a mother's love, and Carol was beyond thrilled to be able to give it to her. She hadn't had the opportunity to have children of her own, and becoming a mother to Lisa was one of the greatest gifts Carol had ever received. Tears streamed down Carol's cheeks as she realized that she may have recently become estranged from the 2 wonderful young people she had helped raise. "Just like that? You're going to leave me for a year and I'm supposed to just accept it? Deal with my husband leaving me for a year?" Carol was furious. "I'm sure Ray Hanna will be there to comfort you," Ted said, a hint of anger in his voice. Carol looked at Ted. She felt her mouth open in startled bewilderment as she began to realize that her husband knew about her relationship with her boss. Ted, for his part, looked at his wife in disgust. He thought she looked like a flounder thrown ashore by a fishing boat, her mouth opening and closing, groping for air with her mouth and trying to find an answer. Denial or confession, a lie or the truth. What to do? What to say? "What do you know?" The fear and trembling in her voice were obvious even to herself. "We're not going to discuss this," Ted said flatly. "Sam has my power of attorney to act for me while I'm gone. There's no mortgage on the house, so with the money you have in your checking and savings account and what you make from your job, you should be fine financially. Please, Ted, can we talk about this? What I had with Ray meant nothing. It was nothing! Tears ran down Carol's cheeks as she realized her husband was serious about leaving. I've been watching you for a month now with the help of private investigators, so I know pretty much everything about your affair. 2 hours ago, Ray Hanna's wife was handed a package containing all the evidence of your affair. Who knows? Maybe you'll live happily ever after with him. No, that's not what I want. I want you to stay here so we can save our marriage. I never meant to hurt you. I love you, only you. Ted shook his head and rolled his eyes in response to his wife's comments. What did you think was going to happen when I found out you were cheating on me? How can you say you never meant to hurt me when you committed acts that you knew would destroy our marriage? Come on, Carol, you're a smart woman. How do you think this was supposed to play out, knowing what my ex-wife put me and the kids through? You were never supposed to know, Carol sobbed. It was something I selfishly did for myself, and I didn't think it would affect our marriage. Haven't I always been there for you? I've never denied you anything. There were 3 in our bed. How many times did you think about him while having sex with me? Carol flared up at this question and looked away from her husband. The forbidden aspect of her affair had always been admirable. The fact that her hot young boss lusted after her while her handsome, personable husband was madly in love with her had kept her libido going for months. She had become insatiable in her desire for both men. Carol wrapped her arms around herself and rocked back and forth, shaking her head as Ted spoke to her. This was never supposed to happen. Ted was never supposed to find out. She would put it out of her mind and everything would go back to normal. Ted was never supposed to find out about this, she croaked out silently, rocking back and forth. This soon turned to horrible sobs as she began to wail that she didn't want a divorce. Please, honey, don't do this. I love you. Please don't ruin our marriage over one stupid mistake. Ted shook his head. One mistake? How many times did you and him have sex? How many times have you lied to me to keep me from finding out about your affair? How many times have you lied to me to spend time with him? One mistake? I don't think so. Count how many times you had sex with him, kissed him, or lied to me, and tell me if you get one mistake in your calculations. Anyway, Ted sighed, I'm done talking about this. You know what you have to do. If you have any questions, call Sam. My kids know we're going to have this conversation today, so don't expect much sympathy if you turn to them, especially Lisa. She loved you and idolized you, and she is absolutely destroyed by your affair. I really hope Ray Hanna was worth it. Carol screamed, No! No, he wasn't worth it! Please don't do this! Please! As if on cue, Ray Hanna's phone rang on Carol's cell phone screen. She stared at the device with her mouth open in horror, as if it were a snake ready to lunge. Carol jabbed her finger at her phone several times to reject the call, finally grabbing it and hurling it across the room, smashing it against the wall. I guess the wife just ruined your boss's life, Ted remarked dryly. Or maybe he called to see if you wanted to meet. Either way, it's none of my business anymore. Carol rose from her chair and staggered forward, her legs seeming to stumble as she fell to her knees in front of her husband, arms folded pleadingly and sobbing. Please, can't we talk about this? You don't have to do this. I'll quit my job. I'll do whatever it takes to save our marriage. Ted shook his head. All you had to do to save your marriage was keep your vows. He stood up and carried his already empty coffee cup to the sink to rinse it before putting it in the dishwasher. I need some alone time with myself. I need some distance from this whole disgusting mess you've turned our lives into. I'll be gone for a year, and you can decide what you want to do. Divorce me to be with Ray or just sleep with him. His wife said she was going to divorce him, but who knows? They have young kids, so she might decide to forgive him and keep the marriage together. This may have been the first time he cheated, so she may change her mind about divorce. A year apart will give you time to figure out what or who you want in life. I choose you, Carol exclaimed. I'll choose you forever. I'll quit my job. I promise I'll never see him again. Please stay. Ted shook his head again. I promise you this. When I come back in a year, we'll sit down and talk about where we are and what we're going to do next. Sam will refrain from filing divorce papers for now. That's the best I can do. I promise I'll be back in a year and we'll talk about us then. Please, Carol sobbed as she continued to kneel and reached out a trembling hand to her husband, who remained motionless before pulling away from her touch. He then turned and walked quickly out the door so his wife wouldn't see the tears in his eyes. Carol was suddenly brought back to the present, noticing that most of the audience in the auditorium had already taken their seats. Carol quickly made her way to her seat and looked across the aisle and saw her stepdaughter Lisa sitting between her fiancé and Trey's wife. Lisa wasn't looking at Carol, but instead was staring straight ahead, never taking her eyes off her father. The anger her stepsons felt towards her was physically painful. The distance between them had become an insurmountable chasm. Lisa was more than a daughter. She was a best friend. And now she wouldn't even look at Carol. The audience fell silent as Trey stepped up to the podium. He pulled a piece of paper from his breast pocket and coughed before he spoke. We are gathered here today to honor the memory of my father, Theodore Bruce II, Trey began, but he was interrupted by some noise. He broke away from his notes when he heard the low, piercing moan of a wounded animal in unimaginable pain. It was his stepmother's cry as she stood up and stumbled forward, falling to her knees before her husband, hands folded as if in prayer. "You promised," she wailed. "You promised you would come back and talk to me. You promised." Carol's voice broke. "You promised." Carol continued sobbing, reaching out a trembling hand to her husband, who remained motionless in his dress uniform, decorated with medals. The yellow and blue flag of Ukraine next to the red, white, and blue flag of the United States, both draped over the polished, gleaming dark walnut coffin in which Ted Bruce lay. A father, soldier, husband. It was a pleasant evening, and I smiled and laughed, seemingly for the first time in a year. Old friends did that for me, and for just one fleeting evening it seemed as if the events of the past year had never happened. Old friends leave a mark in our heart that remains even when they leave. And when you see them again, even if after a long separation, they become the same part that fits perfectly into that space, and it feels like they never left. In fact, they never left. I was the one who left. I packed my bags one day, took a few things that were most important to me, and left. You need to know me, to have lived with me for a very long time, to fully understand what that statement means. I am a person who forms attachments. When I buy a car, I hold on to it until it's driven its last mile yet. It suits me and it feels right. I don't just buy a house, I live in it. I'm attached to it. The walls become my fortress and the land around it nourishes me. My work becomes my calling. I get up in the morning with excitement and go to bed at night with satisfaction for a day well spent. My friends are everything to me and my family comes first. And yet, I find myself 1,000 miles away from the place I called home just a year ago. I left home, quit my job, and most importantly, I left my wife. I certainly didn't disappear. I just decided to leave without warning and didn't tell anyone about it. I didn't hide, and over time I responded to their emails and text messages, eventually answering phone calls and talking to those I left behind. I resisted their pleas to return and broke away from my old life and started a new one. Today, for this one day, all of that fell away. Jean MacDonald had always been my friend. We grew up together, went to school together, married sisters, and lived only a mile apart. He was only in town for one night, traveling from New York to Boston for work. He had come into town late the night before and checked into a hotel off the highway. Jean was so attentive. This morning he was at my front door at 7:30 a.m. with 2 cups of coffee and that mischievous grin I knew all too well. I opened the door dressed only in my boxers. "Well, are we going to have breakfast or are you going to stand there picking your ass all day?" Jean had a way with words. I held out my hand. "You want a sniff?" "Shit, you asshole. No, I don't want a sniff. Put your pants on. I want to have breakfast with you. And wash your goddamn hands. Ladies, if you're reading this, I'm sorry, but this is what guys say and do when you're not around. You don't have to like it. Just try to ignore it. We'll be on our best behavior when you see us. Well, most of the time. I have one of those apartments that some wealthy people build over their garage when they want someone to keep an eye on the place while they travel to expensive and exotic places. I know that sounds bitter. The truth is the Smiths, that's actually their name, are good people who have earned what they have and are generous to others. I was looking for a small and simple place to live. My needs were minimal. Here I didn't have loud roommates screaming, having sex, and having crazy parties day and night. So, Gene could make himself comfortable in the living room while I showered and we called out to each other. "So, how are you here? Is Providence everything you hoped it would be?" "Smart ass," I muttered to myself. "Yes, alcohol is cheap and women are easy if you don't mind chest hair." I heard him cough through the wall. 1 point behind me. Damn, that image will stay with me. The day was drawing to a close. I think by now you've figured out that Gene and I aren't very prim. We don't need fine dining, so I took us to a favorite diner in a small town. It had a nicer crowd, better food, and darker coffee. "So, what are you doing all the time? How's the new job going? Have you made any friends?" "Who the hell are you, my mom?" "Yeah, the job is good. I've made a few friends, or at least I have people who don't make me run the other way when I see them." "Are you looking for someone for fun?" "No, Mommy, but I keep my nose clean." "I told you to stop doing that. It's disgusting." I just smiled and shook my head, looking at my plate. This man, my friend, worked with some top-notch engineers and businessmen, but you'd never guess it if you listened to him. He could turn himself on and off like a chameleon, blending into his environment. "Come on, I've got 12, maybe 14 hours before I need to get back, get a good night's sleep, and hit the road when the sun comes up. What are you going to do to entertain me?" "Well, there are a bunch of gay bars downtown. I know where they are, but I've never been there." He shook his head. "No, Claire's really strict about that. It's her ass and no one else's." "Is that what you said? I love your wife, but I don't need to hear it." He chuckled, going over his plate of beer, hash, and eggs. This guy, this cocky goon, adored his wife as much as I'd once adored my own. "I've got news for you. If that's what I think, I don't need to hear it." No, it isn't. Claire's pregnant." Well, that was all I needed to hear. I shrieked and jumped to my feet. Pulling him out of the chair and into a bear hug, I yelled, "Son of a bitch! When were you going to tell me?" He laughed like a fool, and we got the attention of everyone in the diner. The parents and kids were not thrilled with my outburst. I looked around the room and said loudly, "Can you believe it? They let anyone be a dad now?" This elicited smiles and applause as we sat down at the table again. "Actually, Henry, you embarrass me sometimes with your inappropriate behavior." He had to cough to keep from choking. "What kind of role model are you going to be for your godson?" "What? Godson? Really?" Gene just turned his head sideways and raised his fork like people do, as if to say, "Sure, who else?" There was that smirk again. "Claire insists." I tried to talk her out of it, but you know how she can be when she makes a decision. There was no doubt about it. This day was starting to be the best day of the year. Gene and I had grown up by the water. As kids, we fished the docks and wandered around the boatyards. When we were old enough, our fathers bought us an old snipe sailboat that needed a lot of work. The four of us spent that winter rebuilding and repairing the hull, fixing sails and replacing slings. We were able to build the boat before we even learned how to sail it. We studied our knots, learned the language, and read books on sailing. Much to the disappointment of our mothers, our fathers sent us sailing in early spring long before warm water made capsizing even remotely safe. Sailing became more than a hobby. For both of us, it was a way of life. So, when breakfast was done, we headed up the coast to check out the yards. The sailing crowd can be a great group of people, and we soon found ourselves crewing for an older couple who were going to spend the day on the water. They did offer us dinner when we got back, but we didn't want that. We treated them to the best dinner our tattered clothes could afford. The piers serve the same dinner as the expensive places, but the price is less and the view is better. We had a beautiful day. Back at my place that night, we opened a few beers, sat on the plastic chairs I'd left behind the garage, and talked. We talked about the day gone by, the work we'd both done, and Claire. We talked about the comings and goings home, about all the friends I'd left behind. We talked about everything but the one thing that had left me isolated. Finally, the time came when Gene needed to return to his hotel room. Sleep would give him a quick escape in the morning before the commuter traffic filled the roads into knots. In a quiet, almost apologetic voice, he said, "She's dying without you, Henry." "She'll live. She didn't need me before. She certainly doesn't need me now." "She needs you, and the guilt is killing her. She cries when she goes to bed at night. She doesn't go out anywhere. I swear she doesn't see anyone. Claire comes over and sits with her, and all she does is talk about you and crying. She knows she's screwed up, Henry. She doesn't justify what she did." "Has she ever explained why she did it?" "No. She's seeing a shrink, but she doesn't seem any closer to an answer now than she was before." "Tell her to get a new shrink. She needs you, Henry, your arms around her, not some damn stranger with books and theories." "She had me, but that wasn't enough. Just talk to her, Henry. You don't have to take her back. Just say you forgive her. Tell her you don't hate her, at least she needs that much." "I don't know if I ever hated her. I was angry and hurt beyond anything I thought possible. I never believed she could do that to me. When she did, everything died. I don't hate her, and I don't dislike her. I just miss the woman I married. But that woman is dead, if she ever existed at all." "She existed, Henry, and she exists now. I can't explain why she did it, and I don't know what I would do if I were in your shoes. I just know she's burning from the inside out, and you're the only one who can fix it." "And who's going to fix me, Gene? How can I feel whole again?" "Maybe you can fix each other. Isn't it at least worth a try? It's been a year. Are you happier than when you left? What have you got to lose?" "Everything. Nothing. I don't know. I think about her, and I wonder what would happen if she did it again. What would happen if I let her back in, trusted her again, and she betrayed me again? It would be a longer journey than the first time. Where will I be if I fall again?" "You won't, Henry. She'll never make that mistake again." "How do you know, for she can't explain why she did it the first time? And was it even the first time? Did you ever find out who the asshole was?" "Yeah, she told Claire he was just a guy she worked with." It was dark by then, but even in the dark, Gene could feel my eyes taking in his. "He doesn't work there anymore. I have to give this to you, Henry. She went to his wife and told her everything. She apologized and got slapped around for her troubles. The asshole got dragged through a nasty divorce and left town. He's not around anymore." "It doesn't matter, Gene. Half the world is men, and there's always another waiting for his chance." "No one else has a chance, Henry. She's a single woman, and her man lives in Providence. Pick up the phone, and she'll answer it for you. Say the word, and she'll move. She'll live here in this house, or she'll go to an apartment with you or whatever. Trust me, Henry, she's doing penance, and she's got her head on straight right now. All you have to do is pick up the phone and call her." "I'll think about it." Gene hung his head and thought he'd failed. We stacked the chairs, took the empty cans to the jars, and said our goodbyes. Over the past year, almost all of my friends and relatives had traveled to Providence to discuss the same thing. My sister was the first, and she failed grandly. She walked through the door and, hands on hips, began berating me for running away like a child. She soon found herself standing outside, knocking on the same door again, but there was no answer from inside. When I finally opened the door, she apologized, begging for forgiveness and patience. Her visit had been short and botched, so she had warned the others of what to expect, so they each took their own approach. Gene was the only one who had the patience and history to find the time needed. I sat alone in my apartment that night, and as my thoughts returned to the past year, I reached out and turned off the only light bulb that illuminated the room. I asked myself the same question Gene had asked me. Was I happier now than when I left? I had to admit that I wasn't. I didn't care any more than I did the day I left town. I remembered that day when I stood at the altar and unconditionally made those vows, "Until death do us part." And I thought, then why stop it? This is for eternity. But it didn't last long. It all happened so quickly and without warning. There was no indication that my wife was cheating because she wasn't. She had always been a faithful and loving spouse who reassured me when I needed encouragement and quietly mentored me privately in those rare moments when I needed a loving nudge. Supposedly I was an adult, but I retained the bad habits of my youth. I still had some of those old buttons built in, and when they were pushed, it was bad. I knew I could take offense quickly. She pulled out most of her patience and support for me. However, any sense of betrayal from a friend or coworker would bring devastation. It was an old problem caused by insecurity that had haunted me my whole life. When she cheated, it was that old reflex that put gasoline on the fire of her betrayal. It was the same response that kept me away from her for a year, refusing to talk to her, rejecting any request for forgiveness. I simply razed our marriage to the ground and walked away. It happened when she was out of town due to work. She didn't travel often, but it usually meant that she spent most of the week checking collections and contract compliance. She traveled as part of a team that checked books while others checked production and test results. The trip in question was a long one, as many subcontractors had to be investigated. In the evenings, the team would go out to dinner and blow off steam. This was the second night of the site visit. She danced selflessly and drank too much. It was a bad decision, and in the morning she said she deeply regretted it. Her friends told her to keep it to herself and never tell me, that nothing good would come of it, and she reluctantly agreed. The asshole kept trying to repeat it until she threatened to report him to HR. They were being eavesdropped on. She had no idea she had an enemy at work, but this person overheard the argument, and her fate was sealed. A week later, when the same coworker felt he wasn't getting the attention he deserved, I received an anonymous email. When confronted, my wife confessed. It was only one time and people became human, but it shook my marriage. I packed very few of my belongings and left without warning, leaving my wife devastated behind me. Since then, I have relived that day again 100 times, and here I was, reliving it again. It was all so fresh in my mind. I thought again, am I happier than when I left? I lived in isolation, with no social life and no one to share my life with. Neither of us ever filed for divorce, and I never realized it. When I left, I naturally assumed she would file for the divorce she wanted. The overwhelming anguish and sense of worthlessness of a year ago gave way to a malaise that never left me. There was no one to make me smile, no one to laugh at my jokes, and no one I could hold at night. Am I any happier than when I left? I sat in the dark and pondered my life. Then I slowly stood up and hesitantly reached for my phone.